Hello and welcome to the Email Mastery webinar series, this series of webinars that has been specifically put together for the Australian Institute of Food Science and Technology. My name is Stuart Snooks. I'm an email strategist and productivity expert, and looking forward to taking you through this second webinar in the series of 7 webinars. And this one is going to be why you should not check email first thing in the morning. This is a controversial subject, and it certainly goes against the currently accepted culture of checking email first thing that prevails for most people and most organisations. But getting control of the way you start your day is critical if you want to be truly productive. Now, like many AFIST members, you're probably already highly effective and successful, and you probably don't check email first thing. But it might be your colleagues, your managers, maybe your subordinates who are following the practice of checking email first thing. And this webinar will help you make you aware of the consequences, and you can then take appropriate action. If nothing else, this thought-provoking webinar will get you thinking outside the square and hopefully outside the inbox. So what we're going to look at today is why email is not the best place to start your day. That's the first thing. What are the alternatives to checking email first thing, and how much difference this will really make to your productivity. And of course, if you're not checking email first thing, it begs the question, when should you check your email if it isn't going to be first thing? So once again, this is going to get you thinking outside the square. And one of the reasons that we check email first thing in the morning is because we don't have some other preferred plan in place. So let's have a quick look at this question. When do you usually check email for the first time in a day? And you can type the answer into the chat box, and I can see that already some of the responses coming in. Oh, here's the first one: in bed, checking email for the first time in bed. That's very good of you to confess that, and in fact it's not all that unusual. Secondly, after checking the schedule, so if you like second thing, that's good. Someone else says morning. Someone else is saying about a half an hour after arriving at work. Someone else has mentioned when walking the dog. Checking the email on, checking email on the iPhone. Someone else has said first thing, which is the typical response, and someone else again is saying when I get to work. Well, great. Well, thanks for that feedback. It's interesting to hear when people are checking email for the first time. And here's an interesting article written by Robin Pearce. Now, Robin Pearce is New Zealand's time management guru, or as they call her over there, time management queen. And she wrote an article in May last year about why you shouldn't do email first thing in the day, and it got a tirade of negative feedback. One of them was, here as you can see, Robin, get in touch with the real world. Another comment was, as you can read there, that they always deal with your messages first thing, whether it's email or anything else. Then I do all the small odd jobs, for example, talking to staff, and then the rest of the day is free for the big project with less distractions. And in fact, it's exactly that reason that we shouldn't check email. What happens is that the little things get in the way, and we try and get those out of the way so that we have the rest of the day for the big project. And of course, how often does that happen? What time of the day are you getting to the big project? What successful people do is they tackle that very early in the day and push the distractions back. But again, that's countercultural. That's not the way most of us work. But here was a positive comment. Funnily enough, I've done just this in the past week for the first time prior to reading this post. I had a couple of big projects that needed doing, so I walked into the office and didn't even open Outlook. Went straight into the project and worked till about 1 p.m. before I looked at my emails. The most productive couple of days I've had in ages. So there's some evidence to point towards I'm trying to lead you towards today. And why, rather than just have a productive day every now and again, why not make it a regular habit? What difference would that make if you could on a regular basis be having the most productive days that you've ever had? So let's look at the 7 reasons why you should not check email first thing in the morning. The first of these is that the inbox is not your to-do list. Do you start each day with a clear understanding of the most important task activities for the day? Do you know the first thing that should be done this morning? If you do, that's great, then go ahead and do it. This is what distinguishes successful, productive and high-achieving professionals from those who are struggling to keep up with their workload. On the other hand, by checking email, you risk getting caught up doing what somebody else, in fact, anybody else, wants you to do. Every time you open an email, consider whether it's more important than everything that's already on your to-do list. If you don't ask this question, you'll find yourself assuming the new email is more important, and you'll end up doing tasks for everyone else at the expense of the ones you're already responsible for. So let's be honest, the emails in our inboxes are someone else's to-do list, not ours. But who should be in control of our time? You or the people emailing you? So again, do you start each day with a clear understanding of your most important tasks and activities? And do you know the first thing that should be done this morning? Are you aware of the critical one thing that really matters for the day and would be best done in the morning? And remember, emails in your inbox are somebody else's priorities, somebody else's agenda, somebody else's to-do list, not necessarily yours. So that's the first of the 7 reasons. And it begs the question, who should be in control of your time? Those who are emailing you or you yourself? There's a bit of a tug of war, and you often lose that tug of war when you're in the inbox. The second of the 7 reasons is that starting with email makes you reactive rather than proactive. Managing email effectively begins with having the bigger picture of your overall workload and productivity in mind, particularly early in the day. By starting the day looking at your calendar or diary or to-do list instead of your inbox, you'll start the day with a better perspective of your already existing commitments and priorities for the day. Many of these are unfinished actions that result from emails you received yesterday or even earlier. The inbox need only be accessed at a time of your choosing, when you've set aside a block of time to properly read and process each message. In fact, email is so important these days that it is critical. It's critical that we address it with a clear, fully focused mind rather than in the distracted manner that we so often give it at the start of a busy day or a bit later when it arrives as an interruption. Improving your productivity involves shifting from an inbox-based, interruption-driven and reactive style of work to something that's calendar or diary-based, plan-driven and proactive. Aim to work on the things that are important to you, regardless of their urgency, rather than simply start the day with the urgent but often less important items in your inbox. So that's number 2. Starting with email makes you reactive rather than proactive. And it leads us to this question, why do you check email first thing in the morning? So here's a chance to just quickly type your answer in the chat box and let us know, why do you? Why is that habit one that we've fallen into? And some of the responses coming in now, because part of my customer base is 3 hours ahead of me. Good, that's often a reason we need to feel that we need to quickly catch up with what's been going on, and that's the second point here made by somebody, to see what's going on around me. Okay, that's good. Not necessarily effective, but we all want to know what's going on. Thirdly, see what needs to be done, see if there's anything urgent. Yeah, I'm sure you'll find those things. Fourthly, plan for the day may be largely affected by other people or email. Yes, that's true as well. But I would suggest look at the plan first and then see how that might have to be altered rather than the other way around. Someone else has mentioned urgent orders from customer service. Good, and if you're in the position where you're responsible for instant responses as a part of customer service, that might well be a good reason. Someone else has mentioned here, yes, it's a habit. Someone else says they do it because they check emails from overseas suppliers. Another person says, see if there are any issues with production or scheduling that needs to have some input. And lastly, someone saying more because they're overwhelmed with the amount of work already have to do and don't know where to start. Yes, I can see that. So sometimes it's easier to start at the inbox and deal with the short-term gratification rather than start on the mountain of daily work that's already on the schedule. Good, thanks for that feedback. It's interesting to hear people's reasons for doing what they do. And That leads us on to reason number 3 for not checking email first thing in the morning, and it's this one: ignorance is bliss. As Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, there are many things of which a wise man, and of course wise woman, might choose to be ignorant. In these days of information overload, with so much is going on in the world around us, ignorance is bliss. And when it comes to email in particular, ignorance is bliss. And that's why starting your day focused solely on accomplishing 1 or 2 or even 3 of your highest priority tasks before you look at email will make you both feel and actually be more productive. Avoid checking email for as long as you can. Any new information that arrives via email will only cause you to get distracted, lose focus, and be less productive. We should use what Timothy Ferriss calls in his best-selling book, The 4-Hour Workweek, selective ignorance. This helps us to stay focused on what really matters. As he says, we need to focus on the critical few things rather than get caught up with the trivial many. If you are blissfully unaware of what fires need to be put out, if you don't know about the special sale that's on today, and if you don't see that funny joke your colleague has sent you, are you really any the worse off? You'll find out about these soon enough, but meanwhile you will have made progress early in the day on the things you are responsible for, rather than struggling to get them done later in the day, under time pressure and with sagging energy levels. As Timothy Ferriss also says in his books, sometimes you have to let small bad things happen in order to make progress on some bigger good things. We simply can't do it all, but what we can do is focus on the higher priorities. So that's number 3. Ignorance is bliss to some extent, and that is going to cause some small bad things to happen, but we need to be prepared that we can't cover all bases, and we have some things slip through the crack, but at least it's not the bigger, more important, critical things. So there's a few thoughts for you. The 4th of these 7 reasons is that by not checking email first thing in the morning, it avoids short-term gratification in order to achieve longer-term results. Most of the time when we start the day checking for new messages on email or on social media, Facebook or Twitter, or any of the other innumerable ways that we can easily waste time online, we're not really checking for anything truly important. Isn't it usually that we're just idly searching for an excuse to not do the work we know must be done? For good reason, because it's tough, it might be boring, it might be uninspiring, or even unenjoyable. It's in our nature to look for any reason to not get on with the difficult or challenging, but often important task. Instead, we seek the short-term gratification of answering an email or some other interruption or distraction, and then justify this to ourselves later by saying we didn't get the work done because I had to answer that question from Jenny, or I had to dig up a file for Jeff. But surely we're too smart to fall into that trap. Don't allow yourself the easy out by checking your email at the start of the day, or any random time it arrives during the day, as a way of avoiding an important task at hand. We must recognize that the task really does need to be done, and that it's easy to do it early in the day when we have higher levels of energy and attention. So if you like, just do it. And here's a question for you. What are the high priority or longer term projects you would work on today if it was a no email day? If you couldn't access email today, what would you be doing instead? So just type your answer into the chat box there. And some of the responses coming in, working on a business case. Somebody else mentions yesterday's work. Someone else is saying they would review a project. Someone says they'll do a marketing report. Somebody says they'll do work that is outstanding and over deadline. Someone else here saying laboratory trials. Yes, there's a whole range of things that we need to be getting on with, but we're often distracted from doing those because of the email. Good, thanks for that feedback. It's interesting to know what else is sitting there on our list of planned work that we don't get on with because we start the day with email. So the 5th of our 7 reasons for not checking email first thing in the morning is that number 5, checking email is an excuse for a lack of priorities. So here's a challenging question for you. Why do you check email first thing in the morning? And to be honest, many times it's probably because we lack real clarity about what's important that we should be working on for this day. By checking the inbox first thing in the morning, what we're actually saying is we're immediately prioritizing the new ahead of all those important things that we're already committed to, many of which arrived by email yesterday and days before. By default, what we are saying is that whatever is new, bright, shiny, and seemingly urgent is more important than the things I've already made a commitment to getting done. So the real problem isn't so much that we're checking email first thing, it's that we've considered checking email as a high priority activity simply because we haven't decided what the real high priority work is. And when we don't have a clear list of priorities, checking email becomes an urgent activity that tends to be done at the expense of important ones. Now, of course, most of us do need to check email relatively early in the day, but it shouldn't be first thing. We should instead check and clarify the important tasks and activities that we're already committed to for the day. And you might even get a few processes started on one or more of these tasks. Important work often needs to be brokered back and forth with others, and so we can get a task started even by just sending off a message to get a piece of information or a file from a colleague. So if we would get some of these processes started and then check what new inputs have arrived via email overnight or early in the morning that now need to be integrated with the workload that we already have, this would be a better way to start the day, focused on the bigger picture and then drill down to the smaller picture stuff that comes in via email. Ask yourself this question: what should I be doing if I got no new email this morning? Where would your priorities and activities and energy and focus be directed? So that's number 5. Number 6, and we're getting close to the finish. Number 6, your morning energy and alertness should be directed to higher priorities. Many of us complain about the amount of time that's wasted on phone calls and meetings, but how much time do we waste on email? If you were asked how long you spend looking at email first thing in the morning, there's a good chance that you don't know, or that you'd underestimate the amount of time. See, the problem is that while we think that checking email only takes a few minutes, we can so easily get sucked into other low priority activities that result from opening our email. How often do you start the day with email and find it's half an hour, half a morning, or even half a day before you sit back and say to yourself, now, what is it I'm supposed to be doing today? Each of us has a limited amount of energy and a limited number of truly productive hours each day. For most of us, it's sometime in the morning, early, mid or late morning, and this peak energy time is best used for our highest priority tasks and activities. We should not let email suck us in early in the day and cause us to spend time on it that would be better spent on things that really matter. Let's start the day focused on your highest priorities rather than on the inbox, and you're much more likely to achieve the results and outcomes by which you will be judged and also rewarded, both by yourself and by others. What we need to do is, just having a look at this graphic on the screen now, is I found this book title, Got My Mojo Working. And is that mojo working on our highest priorities, or is it working on relatively trivial email? And while this is important at any time, it's particularly critical first thing in the morning. The way we start our day often sets the tenor or the tone for the whole of the rest of the day. And if we can get that right, if we can start the day from the right perspective, or if you like, outlook, we are much more likely to be high achieving and using our energies towards the things that make progress in the areas that we really need to. So that's the 6th one. The 7th one is that looking at email first thing in the morning, not looking at email first thing in the morning controls unmanaged and unspoken expectations. Many of us protest that we have to check email first thing as others expect a response from us early in the morning. But is that really true? Yes, there are some requests that require a prompt response, but that happens much less frequently than we usually think. But we should also ask ourselves, why is it that others expect a response from you early in the morning? Do you think it might be because we've always responded first thing in the morning and now we've built up that expectation in others? You see, the more often you check email, the more often people will expect you to check it. The quicker you respond to people, the more they will grow to expect it, and the more email they'll send you. But if you simply stop checking email first thing in the morning, others will learn to not expect it anymore. If you respond less quickly, but with thoughtful and well-structured messages, others will expect to have to wait and, funnily enough, be content about it. You see, you're not sitting there with your heels up on the table waiting for their email, and they shouldn't expect that that's the case. But are we controlling that? Are we managing that expectation? Often an expectation that's unspoken. Now, sure, it'll take a week or two for others to adjust, but after a short while they will adjust and they'll fit in with your changed and more productive practices. So who's in control of your time? You or everyone else who sends you an email? So that wraps up the 7 reasons. Let's just cover them off quickly again. Firstly, the inbox is not your to-do list. Secondly, starting with email tends to make you reactive rather than proactive. Thirdly, ignorance is bliss. Fourthly, it avoids the short-term gratification to achieve longer-term goals and objectives and tasks and results. Fifthly, checking email can be an excuse for a lack of priorities. Sixth, your morning energy and alertness is best directed towards your higher priority activities rather than, if you like, the critical few, rather than caught up with the trivial many or the minor detail that is in email. And seventh reason is that it helps to control unmanaged and unspoken expectations. Now, of course, there are some exceptions and variations, and let's just have a quick look at those now. If you work across time zones and need to review overnight email before you can start your work, then yes, that would be a good reason to check email first thing. Secondly, if you're in a customer-focused role, a frontline customer service, and that role requires a very fast response, then of course checking email first up would make sense. Thirdly, if you're in a support or admin role that requires fast responses to colleagues internally, not necessarily customer focused externally, but there may be others in the organisation who are heavily reliant on you responding very quickly, that would be an exception. The fourth one is that you get a chance to check email on your smartphone while travelling on public transport to work. I wouldn't suggest checking that on your smartphone while driving to work, but certainly if you're on public transport or perhaps a passenger in a car, that might be a reasonable thing to do. Make good use of that commuting time. And another possible exception or variation is when you know you're going to be away from your computer for the day, a quick check in the morning can give you peace of mind that you're up to date and that there's nothing sitting there that you're going to miss getting to for the whole day. So there's a couple of thoughts there on some possible exceptions and variations. And you can probably think of others, so quickly type these into your chat box now. What other exceptions or variations can you think of that would justify checking email first thing in the morning? And just type that in now. And I can see here one of the responses is if you're waiting for a response to an email that affects your job. Yes, if you have a high priority task that you want to get on with early in the day and you can't do that until you get a response from a colleague or a customer, then yes, that might be a good reason for checking email first thing. There doesn't appear to be any other responses there on variations and exceptions. Great. And you can probably think of a few others, and we'll think of a few others, but it's amazing how many times when we think about it, there really isn't a lot of good reason for checking email first thing in the morning. And hopefully what we've looked at is 7 reasons that we shouldn't. But so if you're now convinced that not checking email first thing is a good idea, here are a few actions to help you escape the addiction of checking email first thing. Firstly, you can change the default view in your email software so that it opens to the calendar rather than the inbox view when you fire up your computer each morning. That's the first thing you can do. And in fact, one of the follow-up tips I'll send you will give you the how-to steps if you're a user of Outlook. And according to the version Outlook 2010 or Outlook 2003 and 7, I'll have those details there with the how-to steps. In fact, someone's asking, can you provide instructions for changing settings to make calendar default rather than inbox on Gmail? Yes, I'll look into that and let you know about that as well. The second thing that you can do to help you is if you schedule when you will check email. This helps to resist the temptation to check it first thing, as you already know when you're going to get to it. And this is something we're going to unpack in our next webinar, is best times to check email. Just quickly, the research on best practice indicates that 4 planned times a day will allow you to turn all your email around in a 24-hour period. So we should schedule when we are going to check email, and it helps us to resist the temptation to check it first thing or just at random or in response to it as an interruption. So we'll unpack that a little more in the next webinar, but here's a quick heads up. There are 4 planned times. The third thing that we can do is manage expectations, to take away that unspoken pressure from ourselves as well as others that we're going to be available first thing. And again, that's something we'll unpack in the next webinar. We'll talk about how to manage other people's expectations. There's a number of techniques for that. But the key I wanted to get across today is that we can manage other people's expectations. It is within our control. The fourth thing that you might do as an action step is identify and schedule 1, 2, or even 3 high priority tasks to be done before you allow yourself to check email. If you like, give yourself an important piece of work to do and reward yourself by checking the email. The fifth thing is that you might do is work on something important for 30 to 45 minutes, and only when you've completed that high priority task, then check email. And if you can stand it, wait even longer. As long as you're ignorant of everything else that's going on in the inbox, you can stay focused on what you need to work on. Of course, yes, this means you won't know what fires need to be put out. You won't know about the latest political drama, and you won't know about that funny joke that your friend just sent you. But once again, as Timothy Ferriss says, sometimes you have to let those small bad things happen in order to make progress on bigger, more important, high priority things. So there's a few, oh sorry, I've missed the slides. Here they are now. Check the calendar, diary, to-do list first up. Secondly, then go to your inbox. You can change the Outlook default settings. We've talked about that, and the first of the tips I'll send you to follow up today's webinar will show you. Here's an example in Outlook 2010 where the default setting wants to start Outlook up in the inbox, and you can click the Browse button there, as you can see to the right, and that drop-down menu allows you to then choose Calendar. And that changes the way you start the day. So what's next? As a result of today's webinar, you can review the recording and this slideshow. I'll send you a link, as I did with the previous webinar, that will allow you to go and review the recording and the slideshow. The slideshow seems to be very popular. There was only 20-odd people on the last webinar, but we're up to about 113 views of that slideshow so far. So either you're looking at it a lot or passing it on to friends. A second thing you can do is read the 7 reasons to not check email first thing in the morning. You can read that blog, which is on the Email Tiger website. And then I'll also very shortly be putting up an article that pulls these 7 reasons together into one document. You can change the default settings as shown in the email tips that will be sent to you and that we've already alluded to. So there's a few things that you can do to carry on from here. And so to wrap things up today, we have completed the second in the 7 series of webinars. We've done the introduction to email overload and what you can do about it, and today we've looked at why you should not check email first thing in the morning. Our next webinar on Tuesday the 16th of April, once again at 2 o'clock, we'll deal with constant email interruptions and multitasking. Is there a better way? And we'll be having a look at the severe cumulative impact of email as an interruption, how to get control of those interruptions, how to manage other people's expectations on how quickly you respond, and we'll unpack what I referred to earlier, what are the best 4 times of day for monitoring and processing email. And this will help to shift your focus from being email-based and interruption-driven and reactive towards an approach that's more calendar-based, plan-driven and proactive. It's certainly a much more productive way to work, but also a more rewarding, enjoyable way to work. So now it's time to ask me a question. If you have a question at all, you can click the raise your hand icon and I can unmute your microphone, and you can ask your question verbally, or you can type it into the chat box. Now, most people get a little shy speaking into cyberspace and they're reluctant to speak up, so you can chat anonymously in the chat box there. And one of the questions here is, do you recommend turning off alerts for new email in the inbox? Yeah, and that's an excellent question, and I certainly do. I very, very, very highly recommend that we turn off email alerts. As you'll see in our next webinar, if you've scheduled when you are going to look at email, you can be blissfully ignorant or unaware of when each individual email is arriving, because you've got a designated block of time you will go and address them. And what's more, rather than being distracted when it arrives as an interruption and not giving it full focus, when you go to your email at a scheduled block of time, you will be fully focused. You'll make better quality decisions. You'll get better quality responses than allowing it as an interruption. So yes, my answer comprehensively is yes, I do recommend turning off all the new email alerts. And we'll unpack that in the next webinar. There doesn't appear to be any more questions, so if that's the case, we might wrap up today's session, which has been webinar number 2, why you should not check email first thing in the morning. And I look forward to having your input and your feedback to the follow-up tips that we'll send after today's webinar, and I look forward to having your involvement in our next webinar, webinar number 3 on the 16th of April. So all the best until then. Hope you've been able to gain some value out of today, and look forward to talking with you on the 16th of April. Bye-bye for now.